Today we have Ellen Kim with us. Ellen, tell me a bit about yourself.
I am a PharmD by training, and my background spans clinical research, medical communications, and of course, medical affairs in industry. I did spend my early years in agency world before moving into medical affairs at BMS. I did focus on the cell therapy and hematology landscape, where I had the unique challenges of managing. We had an accelerated launch cycle for our asset with 3 indication launches in 1 year. We also had cell therapy, which is kind of a complex referral network. My role was to engage referring clinicians in addition to the cell therapy specialists to ensure that every patient who was eligible to receive this therapy was getting the right referral at the right time for the optimal outcomes.
Interesting. Huge scope.
Yeah.
We constantly hear about the challenges in reaching and engaging HCPs, which is really what spurred this whole discussion. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you saw in that role?
Yes, a couple things, depending on who you're speaking to, right? Because if they're doing cell therapy every day and this is their passion, those clinicians were easier to reach because they were wanting the latest data, and oftentimes they were on our clinical trials, so they were the
Okay.
experts. Now you go to the referring network, what we call the community clinicians or referring doctors, which comprises the majority of the US healthcare landscape. These doctors are incredibly busy, and I don't think it's a secret that we have a lack of primary care
Hmm.
providers. So they're very much bombarded by data, by patients. They're seeing many, many patients every day with all different kinds of cancers. It's really difficult for them to keep up with every industry, every product, especially real time. They're probably being bombarded by all the biotechs, all the big pharma companies. Oftentimes, even within the same company, we had multiple people reaching out to some of these people from commercial, medical, all of it. As an example, when I did community advisory boards, and these are paid time, we're paying them to give us insights. I think I had to probably send like 70 emails and maybe get like 5
Yeah.
responses. It was a very low rate if you do the math. I try to think of what is the value that we can provide to them? Why would they want to give us our time? And really put yourself in their
Mm.
shoes, and how can you make it easiest for them to digest the data, to make it most concise, knowing that their time is precious and knowing that they are bombarded by a lot of information. Their priority is not gonna be the pharma priority. Their priority is just, treating
Yeah,
the patient that's in front of
certainly.
them and just to get through the day. This can be difficult because sometimes cell therapy or other cancers or rare diseases, the disease landscape doesn't allow you to do that 10-second
Mm.
message. It's kind of complicated. It's kind of a puzzle to figure out what is the 1 or 2 messages that we want to really focus
Mm.
on when we get in front of a community physician. And even the academic physician, you wanna kind of keep it nice and concise. And again, just think about what value you're bringing. Going back to the advisory board example, the people that were engaged, they loved being in these because they could hear from their colleagues. A lot of times they would start asking questions to
Mm.
each other in these meetings. Pharma is moderating, but sometimes you just kind of step back and let them
Yeah.
talk and say, "Hey, what are you doing in this practice?" They did find that valuable, and a lot of times they want to come back for another advisory board and just more opportunities because it allows that peer-to-peer connect.
Interesting. So really clarity of message and concise if possible, given the small time frame that you have in order to reach these individuals.
Yeah.
Was there anything novel from a solution perspective that you saw, given you only had a very short period of time to deliver a very concise message? What were you able to employ there to really help?
Yeah, a couple things. The messaging is more from like the scientific
Hmm.
communications perspective. And again, keeping it short and sweet. Usually something like this requires cross-functional
Yeah.
alignment and making sure everyone's aligned on that message. In terms of the novel ways you can reach them and how to focus your
Mm.
efforts, some of the things we did was meet them where they're at. They're already going to some of these big
Hmm.
meetings in their local states. For example, in Florida, there was something called Flasco. I think almost every clinician shows up to the annual fall
Mm.
meeting. So they're already going there trying to get their
Yep.
credits, trying to get the learnings, meeting their peers. You could pay for a medical sponsored time,
Mm.
like a lunch and
Mhm.
learn. These were very popular when we did them. So in 1 year, we were able to reach over a
Oh,
thousand
wow.
clinicians. We did maybe 6 to 8 of these types of
Mhm.
meetings. So it was live meetings. So it does require time and
Yep.
effort. But because they're live discussions and we try to get doctors to run a lot of the
Mhm.
discussion. Again, pharma would moderate, but we would bring experts and do a discussion panel and have them talk on stage. This was very popular because people wanted to hear from
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
treating clinicians. What are they doing? What is the latest data at these meetings? If you're an MSL, you meet with your territory providers. But even from the medical affairs perspective, you get to meet face to face and have kind of put a face
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
name and get to have very natural conversations. That was my experience. And I got to make those connections so that I remember for the next time if we have an ad board, if we have some engagement, that I would know exactly who from Florida, who from Ohio, who from Indiana, just from going to a lot of these state
Mm.
society sponsored meetings that are already on
Yep.
calendar, and you just try to make that connection. Another big avenue that we tried to do towards the end was peer to
Mhm.
peer. This is a big tactic that pharma uses. I do think it's effective because you're using the
Uh-huh.
experts and encouraging that collegial dialogue. So there's different programs that are third party sponsored where a lot of the community clinicians are already signed in for some of these networks. You can use that network and get
Mm.
insights. You would identify some experts that know your data, a group of like 10 to 12 community physicians. Pharma is kind of removed from that
Yeah.
process, but you get a lot of the insights and their real time reactions and really deep dive conversations around those. Um, don't forget about the broad clinician network. It's not just the
Mhm.
MD, it's the pharmacist, it's the nurse practitioner who's really counseling the patient, who's going through a lot of these side effects, a lot of the screening process, which is important for patient identification. There, we worked with other professional societies. Again, a lot of these APPs are already subscribed to things like JADPRO,
Yep.
HOPA. We try to identify programs with these societies.
Mm.
There are already like thousands of providers who are getting the
Yeah.
alerts or programs, and they're already looking at these. So you integrate your data and the latest information using these
Interesting. So
networks.
there are some venues where you're reaching thousands. There are some venues where you're reaching dozens or hundreds, and there are some venues where you're reaching much smaller samples. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the smaller KOL discussion forums and how you think about those in terms of reach and engagement?
The one that I mentioned with 10 to 12, that is smaller, but it takes throughout the
Uh-huh.
region, so actually it adds up to, like,
Okay.
hundreds and thousands. What I didn't mention is regional ad boards. Again, the ad boards is not something novel, but that is a smaller group setting, so you get to really know individual physicians, and that is maybe not as wide of a
Mm.
reach, but that is different in the sense that you're establishing longer term relationships,
Mhm.
but these are paid time, so it's different, but it's more, I know that these are the key players in this territory. You know, you're going to have to either work with them or engage with them at some point, or they are seeing many
Mm.
patients, especially the larger
Yeah.
community practices. So I would say that even if it's maybe a smaller
Mm.
number, it's still different because you get to know where their head's at. And if they're thinking a certain way, then that's likely representative of other clinicians who
Yeah.
have that similar patient population or have that similar background of training, et
Okay.
cetera. I think it's good for getting insights that way because then
Mm.
that will help inform your
Yeah.
strategy and the gaps that you see.
We discussed several things here. So maybe just to wrap up, if you could give one piece of advice for Med Affairs leaders struggling with HCP engagement, what would it be?
And I think there's AI now, it's
Hmm.
here. So I'm sure there will be other innovative ways moving forward that I'm not as familiar with. But I still believe that the peer-to-peer conversations, the face-to-face interactions, I still think that is one of the powerful
Mm.
tools that we still have and that is likely effective. Make sure that even if you're medical affairs and not the field team, if you're at a live congress, make sure you have lots of good connections lined up and meetings. Even if it's not a formal meeting, even if it's a casual touch point, make sure you maintain those relationships with the providers, the experts in the field. They may not remember everyone's name or title, but they'll likely remember the quality of the scientific dialogue, that genuine connection that you had, that personal connection, just being an advocate for them too, understanding where they're coming from, what are their
Mm.
priorities. That will really encourage them to want to work with your company, your team, and ultimately that partnership is going to drive better outcomes.
Perfect. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for your time today. Very insightful comments. I'm sure our viewers will find great value in it. Appreciate everything. Any last comments or thoughts?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. And, this is an important topic, so it's great that you're doing
Super.
this.
Thank you so much.